Now I'd like to listen to a recording that I did with a quartet and discuss how I'm integrating all these ideas in the groove and how the communication between the band members dictates what I play. The idea is to use our ears to direct our limbs to create a sympathetic accompaniment and to keep the music growing. When we're trading solos, we want our ideas to relate and connect to each other so that there's a continuous melodic line running through the music. One man will play some kind of motivic material, and I'm listening for a tiny fragment that I can transfer to the drums, make a drum version of, and then boomerang back. It's not simply a matter of playing the licks that we've been talking about. It's a matter of integrating them in a logical fashion within the context of the music in that moment. So let's go into the control room and listen to this track. We're here in the control room at Range with Brian R., and I'd like to tie all the themes we've been discussing thus far together by listening to a live recording I made a number of years ago with a quartet consisting of George Garzone on saxophone, Kenny Werner on piano, and Ed Schuler on bass. And what I'd like to do is listen to the trading section of the song and stop after each of the piano or saxophone trades and discuss what I heard in their playing and then listen to how I reacted to what they did. Because the idea of a theme continuing through the song is really important, and a conversation among the musicians. Now this particular song is a 12-measure structure. It's not a blues, but it's a 12-measure structure. And at this point, we've been playing for 7 or 8 minutes, and the bass solo is just concluding. And he has sent a signal to us that he's wrapping up his solo by making a reference to the melody. And that's often the way people conclude their solos. They'll either get much softer in volume, or they'll play a reference to the melody, and that's an indication that the improvising is done. And the other musicians at that point have the option of returning to the melody and ending the song, or having a drum solo, or having some kind of trading. And in this case, we trade 12-measure choruses, and the piano plays the first chorus. So let's see what he played, let's see what Kenny played, and then we'll discuss how I reacted to it. Brian? So what I heard Kenny play was a motivic idea based on a 5/8 rhythm. He's playing be-bodo, 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 and I took that structure and made a drum version of it to try and tie these two sections together. And then in the end, I distorted it and threw it back to George Garzone. So let's listen to Kenny's solo, see if you can hear that 5/8 motif that he plays and how I develop it on the drums. Can you hear that? Be-bodo, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, it's difficult to feel that kind of asymmetrical phrase going through the time. So you have several kinds of accounting going on in your mind. You've got to maintain the integrity of the phrase, but more importantly, you've got to keep your place in 4/4 and feel the whole 12 measures, regardless of how asymmetrical your improvisation is. So let's listen to that one more time from the beginning. See if you can hear the connection between his little motive and how I develop it. And then we'll continue and see how George picks up with what I did. So he doesn't really take the idea that Kenny and I are developing, but what I hear in his phrases, at the conclusion of his 12-measure phrase, he plays this melodic idea that sounds like he's going out of time. I got the impression that he was trying to sound like he was drunk. It gets real wobbly in the time. And when I pick up my drum solo, I'm trying to capture that mood and carry it into the next section of the song. So let's listen to George's 12 and my 12 and see if you can hear that connection. Listen particularly to the very end of his phrase and how it feels off kilter and the way I'm capturing that same feeling. Now, Kenny generates an incredible amount of momentum in his 12-measure phrase. And I had the feeling that I couldn't compete with the intensity of what he plays. So at the beginning of my next exchange, I leave some silence to let that tension dissipate a little bit. And then I can get a fresh start at a level that I can build from into the next phrase. So we'll listen to what Kenny plays and listen to how the energy increases and increases, and I have nowhere to go. So I kind of let the balloon burst for a second and then resume. We'll listen to Kenny's, my trade, and then see what George does after that. So George kind of takes the material that I'm developing at the end of my solo, and he begins his 12-measure phrase with something that resembles what I left him with. Now, at the end of his solo, he plays a motivic idea that I grab for my next 12. And he plays this idea that's, if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, but-up, 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 and 2, and 4, and 2, and 4. And I try and make a drum version of that and then boomerang the whole thing back to Kenny for his next exchange. So let's hear where George started and see if you can hear that little but-up, 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 where it sounds like the time is turned around. And then see if you can hear the drum version of that little idea. I think that was pretty vivid, the way that the motivic material got tossed from one player to another. Now in Kenny's exchange, he plays, again, a run of eighth notes, and I can't really find a structure that I'm going to grab. So I play some running eighth notes and trying to create a melody that is somehow complementary, even if it isn't literally related to what he plays. Can we listen to Kenny's phrase and my phrase, and then we'll continue on to the next one. So George leaves me with a very nice motivic idea to develop, which is one ba-da-da-do, 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 ba-da-da, one ba-da-da-do, 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 ba-da-da. And I find a way to make a drum phrase out of that. Let's check it out again from George's solo into the drum solo and see if you can hear the way he ends his solo and how I build my 12 measures off of this motivic idea that he's left me with. So Kenny takes the energy that I'm playing with and really reaches a high peak with his solo. And we've been talking about technique all day, and technique of the hands, technique of coordination, technique of integrating phrases together. And the part of technique that is really critical for a high level of musicianship is not having fast hands or having amazing coordination, but it's having fast ears so that you can react to what's going on around you and make the judgments that the other musicians make seem like brilliant choices. That's our job as accompanists, to make whatever the other guys are doing seem like it's absolutely the right thing. And one is fortunate if you have the opportunity to play with like-minded musicians who make your choices sound like the right choices. And this kind of internal communication keeps the music fresh. If we simply play the licks that we know, then it's a foregone conclusion what will happen. But if there can be an organic, rolling nature to the music, then it's more fun to play, it's more interesting to listen to, and there's a possibility for something really creative to happen. So you heard the connection between the fast, dark-sounding fill I played at the end of my phrase and the way George picked up his solo with the same kind of mood. At the end of George's phrase, he begins to bring the dynamics down, and that's a suggestion that maybe we're going to wrap up the trading section. So I play one more 12-measure section and kind of imply the melody. I thin out the density and the volume of what I'm playing and play some shapes that are similar to the melody, and that sends a signal to the other guys that we're going home. So we'll take it from George's solo into my last 12-measure phrase. So I hope that this discussion gives you some insight into the way you can use the material you have, the phrases we've been talking about, but the way you need to integrate them with the players that you're playing with. Now, if this ensemble played with a more bebop concept, I would be playing different vocabulary. But the vocabulary is really dictated by the mood and the expressiveness and the types of content that the other musicians are playing. And that's what musicianship is all about. It's about connecting everything that everyone plays to make the sum of the parts greater than the individual parts. And musicians that play this way always have opportunities to work because your playing embraces the choices that the others make, and the music remains fresh. So I hope you gain some insight from this. Thanks.